Hello, everyone. My name is George Connolly. I'm the CEO of OneLedger, and I'd like to welcome you to another episode of OneLedger Talks. Today, we have Mr. Anil Nadiq, who is co-founder of our most recent partner, TraceX. And we're going to be talking about the evolution of this technology in the agricultural space. Welcome, Anil.
Thank you, George. It's a pleasure to be here and really look forward to this conversation today.
All right, before I allow you to introduce yourself, I'm just going to speak to OneLedger and what OneLedger is. So launched in 2018, OneLedger is a layer one solution to help businesses, governments, and individuals solve complex and important challenges using blockchain and other disruptive technologies. OneLedger runs on a mainnet, Kratos, and one of the things that both companies have in common is that we seek to use the technology to solve real world problems. So it's not an academic pursuit, it's solving real world problems. The network uses a distributed consensus protocol to serve a range of use cases and to seamlessly bridge the several of the most popular blockchain networks around. And this not only allows for cross-chain transactions, but also provides a marketplace for building up sophisticated businesses like TraceX, where we can get modules using plug and play, and then really create world-class problem-solving solutions. So with that, I'm going to let Anil introduce himself and then introduce TraceX. Anil?
Thank you, George, and also a warm welcome to all the listeners all over. My full name is Anil Nadiq. I'm based in Bangalore, in India, which is the tech hub of India. I'm a software professional, pretty much started my career working in the software industry out of India, spent time working in the US, Japan, UK, and in the Middle East. Really focused on building software technology solutions for global clients, for outsourcing, for product engineering, and sales. One of the key things that I learned is that it's a flat world in the sense, being wherever you are, you could offer technology as a solution to solve global problems. And that really intrigued me a lot in terms of how we can really use technology to solve some of the pressing problems we had. And in 2016, me and my partner, Tresvant, we started off on an entrepreneur journey where we created a company called Jiva Bhumi, which is pretty much life from the soil, where we were trying to get access to safe food ourselves for our families. And in that quest, we really went deep into the agri ecosystem, understood the various challenges that existed across the chain, and we created an organic brand of sustainable food ecosystem where we would connect farmers and consumers via our portal. And that really went, our learning really went very deep in understanding the challenges in the supply chain and smallholder ecosystems like we operated out of in India. And also, one of the key things we were trying to solve and really answer was how do we quantify or ultimately bring credibility to any of the claims that we're doing. If we're saying organic, how can we justify that credibility with data? And that's where our technology expertise came into play. And then we started building a technology as an in-house project of sorts to create a digital connected supply chain and try and provide the traceability information to our customers. And in that journey, it really dawned on us that this is not just an internal problem, this is more of an industry-wide challenge. And that led to the conceptualization of TraceX, and eventually TraceX was born in September of 2019, and here we are having the conversation. So thank you. Yeah.
That's a fantastic story. Look, if we look at what makes life happen, Water is perhaps the only element that allows life to thrive. And every business that we have seen take technology on, technology has become a workforce multiplier for that business, and it has become a boom for that business. So we apply technology to the automotive industry, and you see the sort of expansion we have there. We apply technology to the investment and trading industry, and you see the expansion that we have there. You apply technology to the healthcare field, and you see the kind of expansion that you have. And look at, I think, the agricultural industry, which is the basis for our existence, is long overdue for a tech boom. And I am so pleased that you are starting this process. One of the things that OneLedger did in the past is that we looked at the logistics. So we looked at the journey of the food from farm to fork. What TraceX is able to do now is that you're able to verify every single step of that process. And that, I think, is amazing. So I want you to tell me, and now let's not use application terms or anything, let's use real language. Tell me how TraceX makes a difference in full food supply chains and the same credibility for the organic space that you spoke about just now.
Yeah, definitely. So I think you rightly pointed out agriculture is one of the foundations of our existence, and water is the essence of it. But when you look at the entire global food supply chains, and more so from the perspective of the smallholder ecosystem that pretty much produces about 70% of the food that we consume, that's one of the least, or rather the last sector which has actually had any digital penetration. When I look at major production hubs like India or Africa to Southeast Asia to Latin America, where smallholder farmers form the backbone of that entire production process, there is very little technology that is still penetrated in that area, and it's one of the greenfield sectors still, which surprisingly, which is feeding the world, but still unable to absorb a lot of the technology. One, probably because there isn't a certain level of in our education system, if you ask a child what do they want to become, they will tell you that they want to become a doctor, that they would want to become a fighter pilot, to want to become a banker, and so on. But very few really want to become a farmer to produce food, right? So it's so critical. And large-scale industrialization is also limiting the amount of diversity in the food ecosystems that are out there. And the other big challenge is, again, how do we blend this with the real issue and impact that's happening around, the global climate change impacts that's really impacting the food ecosystem significantly, erosion of soil, fertility, to drastic changes in climate that's impacting our ability to produce sustainable food. So, given that context, applying technology to solve the problem where we are able to identify the entire chain from identifying the farmer to identifying what exactly they're producing, to really identifying what are the practices of sustainable practices that one can follow, to ultimately link that to how a producer or an aggregator is able to connect that and pick up that produce, how effectively and efficiently it's processed, meeting all the quality and compliance standards, food safety standards, and be able to do a very efficient distribution to ultimately how it comes down to your food on your table. And very much when I interact with a lot of consumers and I really ask them, do you know where your food comes from? Very few really know even for a single product, what they consume, very few really know where it actually comes from. See, that's where the challenge and the problem also lies, right? So because we are consuming without really being conscious about all of this. So how can we build a level of interaction at every level, at every point in the supply chain, so that story can be put out? So I think that is where a digital connected supply chain plays a very important role, being able to connect all the participants on the supply chain very seamlessly. That technology is like the underlying layer, but ultimately the outcome it results in is better transparency and trust across the entire chain, ability to track and trace, compliance to quality standards, and be able to answer the question of is my food really sustainable? What am I eating? Do I know who produced it? Do I want to support it? From a consumer perspective, the consumer provenance becomes very, very important. I think that is what technology can solve for. And there are multiple other outcomes with the same connected supply chain. You're able to now, measure multiple metrics, be it around traceability to sustainability to carbon emission, and also potentially in the future be able to derive a financial benefit that is able to provide a more equitable share of the profits in the entire chain, from what a consumer pays to what a farmer ultimately gets, right? So this becomes more of a conscious model of production and sustainable consumption. And also the important aspect is how do we take this collectively in our global journey of trying to achieve net zero goals. So one of the missions that statements that we also say is how can we accelerate the collective journey to achieve net zero goals, right? So when we work with large agribusinesses, their biggest challenge is how can they measure scope 3 emissions, essentially emissions that result from their supply chains producing anything that they consume in their chains. So for example, a large FMCG brand would be consuming significant amount of, say, paddy or wheat or corn from their supply chains. But they can only control what happens within the factory in terms of how efficiently their production processes are. But really to measure the scope 3 emissions, where their suppliers, how are they treating their producers? How is the actual food being produced? So that's still an area that we're able to connect and measure that very effectively. So that kind of starts driving change globally more effectively. So that, I think, just to link ultimately to your question of real world, if you're able to consume something without having to worry too much whether that is going to ultimately result in our planet being more sustainable or our actions being more sustainable, I think everybody should have that default choice, or the technology should kind of enable that by default, right? Without having to do a lot of other things. So and that's how we see technology playing a significant role there. But also when you started off with blockchain as a technology component in this whole ecosystem, we also saw that particular leveraging cutting edge technology, especially blockchains, which lends itself seamlessly to a supply chain use case where you have multiple participants in a chain, not necessarily everybody knows each other, and then being able to create a seamless network of multiple people coming together or multiple organizations coming together and ultimately achieve a common objective where all of the data is transparent, immutable, completely secure. That's where blockchain plays a very significant role here. Right?
All right. So that was quite a bit. I mean, I learned a lot just now. So we talked about a lack of aspiration for the workforce, basically. Then we spoke to industrialization, climate change, critical life space, and then how the technology helps to eliminate inaccuracies in terms of the manual inspection associated with that, collect the data across multiple locations and quantification of that data. So you can then use it Then we spoke to blockchain side where we create auditable, immutable records for the process and the regulatory compliance. And all of this obviously leads to an increase in speed, an increase in efficiency, increase in yield, an increase in process. So the FMCGs become a lot more efficient, the consumer is happier, and hopefully we get to the scope 3 goals where we get closer to net zero. And that's good for everyone. Um, that's absolutely amazing. I am really taken by this. So I want you to tell me about any challenges. All right. So now we're going to go through a process where we look at the challenges that exist today in the supply chains, and and then let's see how that challenge exists, and then basically what we can put in place to solve it.
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful question in terms of the challenges. Again, there is no dearth of challenges in this sector pretty much, but more importantly, I think I would focus on how can we operationalize technology in the context of the ecosystem that we're dealing with. How can we ensure the technology becomes very seamless. In terms of how can I localize the language, how can I make sure that it works in an environment where it is very rugged, how can I ensure that it is pretty much usable by somebody who is kind of not so tech savvy, may not really have a smartphone, may not really have access to a very great network. How can we make sure that the adoption of technology is done by people on the ground who do work on a daily basis? How can technology then become very seamless in the sense, how can I reduce the manual collection of data? Can it automatically integrate with satellites, or can it get data from remote sensing, GIS data, to information that's already available with open source data, could be potentially with the local governments, and so on. Again, as you start looking at every aspect, that you want to optimize, you want to make the entire process very seamless. And then you start seeing that operationalizing the technology is a lot harder than what it would have been in other industries. Like, for example, automobile, very organized, to an industry which is already, the people there are already tech savvy, so you don't have to teach them a lot of new things, right? So agriculture is still stuck in the past in some ways, but it's also rooted in its fundamentals of what it does with the soil, with the environment. So how can you take that along as you go? I think that's where technology plays a very, very critical role. And a lot of our quest has been to really simplify technology for use at the ground level. We see a lot more digital literacy when it comes to, for example, a factory or a collection center or a processing center, processing unit. The technology adoption is a lot easier. But as you go to the ground level, as you start working with the farmer ecosystem, there's very unique cultural, political, geographical challenges that come up. And how can you build technology that kind of respond to such unique needs, right? And I think that is where we've been fortunate enough to work with a lot of our customers, co-create a lot of the solutions, test it on the ground along with our partners. And it's ultimately a very collaborative approach, and that really has led to a lot of good innovations that we're able to deploy in the ground. And there's still a lot more to do, and I think we're just beginning there. Yeah.
Operationalizing almost any solution, even in a tech-savvy environment, when you're asking individuals to change the way that they're currently doing the work. I've found that in the deployment of several solutions, which include technology, that part is always the highest hill to climb. with respect to having people change the way they work and adopt a new way, even if it makes it 100 times easier. So I definitely understand the kind of challenges that you have there, particularly in industrial agriculture, where uh, you have family farms with um, very archaic means, like a guy who plows the land with a plow and a horse or a plow and a cow. What are you going to tell him to improve his business? I mean, so I guess one of the hardest parts is trying to convince the consumer, well, the customer in that case, that you can help. But in that instance, what he's able to yield over and above what he did before is the proof, right? So I suppose ministries of agriculture become very important in this space in being able to bring all those small farmers together and get them a chance to thrive.
Yep.
All right. So the next question that I have is, what kind of decentralized applications the market of food supply chains need in order to enhance traceability and transparency? I know that's exactly what your product does, but your product can't work in isolation. So you need a series of add-ons in order to work well, regardless if it's drones or GIS mapping, sensor systems, hydrofoils, I assume, etc. So tell us about that for me.
Yeah, definitely. So see, in a typical connected supply chain, you have multiple, important, I would say, nodes in the system that are very important. So there is a producer, which is typically a farmer. Then there is a aggregator who kind of either through a collective or through an organization, all of that come together. So you have a larger aggregation of the produce. Then it gets into some level of transportation, gets into a small storage place, and then it gets into a processing. And from the processing, you can have multiple distribution nodes, and ultimately that can get into an export or get into the local market, retailing, consumer branding, and ultimately reach the consumer. So there are multiple nodes that get associated, and at every point there are different personas or different outcomes that different businesses look for. And then on top of it, you also have the ecosystem enablers, like the government and the policy play a very, very critical role in enabling the right type of behavior and adoption in the ecosystem, to other associated players, like those who supply seeds to inputs, to enable financing to happen, financial institutions, to other allied associations in terms of transportation, and all of this get involved to ultimately make the chain operationally effective. So in that context, what we have to look at is how can we ensure the entire movement of data. We work, if there is no, like, we have a full stack digital tool set, but at the same time, we always are open to integrate with data sets that already exist. For example, if an organization has their own ERP system or internal system, we have an open API infrastructure layer where that can really integrate and pull the data from that system, so that you don't have to do duplication of data. Double entry is completely avoided. If on the field there are IoT devices that, for example, measure the soil moisture, to something that automatically measure the weight of the produce when it is brought into a collection center, to anything else that comes in along the chain that can drive more efficiency, automation, or to some extent of industrialization. All of that, we've created an API layer that it helps you to bring data in, take data out very effectively, very simplistically. And that collaboration is so important, because otherwise even small amount of disconnections from one to the other, which leads to a lot of distrust in the ecosystem. So we kind of print QR codes at every stage and attach it to the unit. So you don't have to duplicate the data. You just scan and accept, and that already has all of the data that is already built in. And again, further efficiency, integrating with satellite imagery will help you derive a lot of local weather information from the local weather providers, or from global providers as well. And there are multiple data, and the technology there also is undergoing significant change. We're exploring technology where you're able to automatically identify field boundaries without somebody having to manually map it, to being able to identify critical soil parameters through remote sensing, be it major nutrients to soil carbon to soil moisture and so on. So that kind of makes the deployment of solutions a lot more effective, and your manual effort is more focused on helping the farmers, or operationalizing technology, or using that to further enhance your capacity, right? So those are the things that really technology can provide, and those are the things that are really our focus areas. From drone, again, drone becomes very important in certain cases where you have to measure with certainty some output, where you cannot really rely on satellite or remote sensing, because the resolution is sometimes not good enough, or the intensity with which you want to capture the data may not be effective. So you've got to balance between what you do manually to what you leverage other means of technology. And as you blend in with the right mixture for the right geography, then this becomes more and more effective. For example, if it's a very, very large farm holder ecosystem, there's a lot of automation that one can afford. But in a smallholder ecosystem, you got to be more conscious about the cost and the ability to monetize that further, right? So I think that's where the technology play becomes very, very important and effective. But interestingly, what's also happening is some of these innovations are increasingly being funded through more sustainable means. Like, for example, can I incentivize the farmer to adopt sustainable practices by funding some of the production deficit through a green bond, or through a carbon credit, for example, right? I think these are innovations that really help change the mindset. Like you said earlier, change is always difficult at any stage. So how can you kind of incentivize those things? So data kind of becomes a very key part of how the entire decision making and the behavioral change is ultimately derived, right? So, and that's where we continuously look to integrate with more and more technology partners in the ecosystem to deliver a better experience for all the participants in the chain. Yeah.
And so much great stuff. Something that you said earlier also brought a point back to me, which is that you print QR codes at each point of the process. And that QR code is then a traceable certificate as to the whole process that the product would have gone through. And one of the things that we had to address with one client, and we're still addressing it, is cradle larceny. Okay. So, and the thing about blockchain in agriculture is that it can track all types of information about the plants, seed, source, quality, the crop growth, and even the travel of the plant after it leaves the farm. So think about this for an instance. A farmer buys seedlings from a reputable source, and that's tracked into his plant. He then grows the crop. When the crop is reaped, that's also tracked. when it travels to market, it's also tracked. So the consumer, the farm to fork process, the consumer can scan the QR code and see it, rather than buying from a vendor by the side of the street who has no type of certification, no source. Okay. And so one of the things that the data can do is that it can improve the supply chain transparency, eliminate concerns associated with illegal and unethical operations, and it can also track contamination. Let's say there's an issue, we have to call product back, or there's an issue with pesticides or herbicides that are being used in case of a recall. So the major aim of the technology in that instance was for sustainability and food security. And I don't know if that's as big a problem in India as it is in the Americas, but in the Americas, stealing crops is an industry. Okay,
Okay.
it's an industry, and if you can find a way to stop those thieves from being able to sell the produce, that's the critical thing. If you don't have the certification QR code, then you teach the consumers don't buy it because you don't know what state it's in, if it's contaminated, if it hasn't gone through the full herbicide cleansing process, etc., or if it's just a dangerous item. So only certified product would be sold. So that's one of the areas that we are looking at for consumers on our end in terms of how we do
Wonderful.
that. You laugh a bit when I said it's an industry, but it is. It actually is. Has your technology ever been used for insurance in the farming industry? Because in the Americas, insurance in the farming industry are there are two things that don't happen. There's no insurance. And I've heard about some creative ways to use technology to influence insurance and get the regulations going. How does that work?
Yeah, I think we've actually not yet deployed this for the insurance, but we're in talks with a couple of very interesting players there on the insurance side to bring that out. But in essence, the idea is that we need, and what we've done is also that we work with one of the largest agriculture banks in India, along with a large public sector financing bank, together to enable credit to the farmer using the same trusted digital connected data now. Now, a natural extension of that is to also take insure the crop, because when you're lending, essentially you are exposed as a lender to a lot of insurance risk, and the pre-harvest, or pretty much what from the seed till you see the produce, right? So that journey is the riskiest part, because you can have natural calamities come and affect your crop, to a lot of pests that can affect your yield, to very difficult climate situation, to theft, to other things come into play there, primarily because the amount of protection you can do in an open field is going to be limited. So an insurance product, when for any insurance product for that matter, or any lending product for that matter, you got to cover your risks, and the more effective that coverage can happen when you have more quantifiable data rather than a very generic data. I think that is where data comes into play. The identity of the farmer, what crop he's producing, exactly what acreage is being cultivated, what are the practices that you effectively using. So all of the data helps one create a very specific innovative product or an innovative offering that makes it affordable. If you make it a very generic offering, then its affordability for that ecosystem is very low, right? So I think that is where the ability to absorb that cost becomes more effective when you have the data points which are more accurate. and reflects the real risk that one carries. I think that's part of what I've seen being very, very effective. And I think this is also a great opportunity to kind of bring that ecosystem and pilot that. And we're in the process of hopefully doing a couple of deals in that area, which should also give us more learning on the field. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I'm just gonna speak now towards to what we are trying to do in terms of technology. So being a layer one solution that we think help businesses and governments to find real world solutions to problems. Water and food production and the attendant distribution, I think, is a problem that the world hasn't yet solved. We think that conservation, obviously, critical pillars that are required for life. And we think that that could all benefit from an infusion of technology. And it has the potential to exponentially increase the output and the development of every single industrial segment in the agricultural space. My personal view is that agri-tech solutions are long overdue and still underutilized. I'm very excited about your product because of the good that it does in the world and the good that can be derived from it. And we want to be a part of the process of taking that product along with the solutions that we have that complement it to be able to use it in the agricultural space to make a real difference for mankind. And this sort of provides a marketplace for building sophisticated business models using plug and play components like we have. And we embrace partners like TraceX who sort of bring it all together. Very excited about the prospects for the future when the two of us start to wrap our heads around these issues. I'd like to get your feedback on what what you would like to achieve. And then I'm going to ask you one final question where I'm going to make you omniscient and omnipotent as well. So you're all powerful and you're all knowing. And if you could take your technology, white slate, and do anything with it, tell me what you do. So first to the cooperation, and then you become omniscient and omnipotent for a minute.
Very interesting to see that perspective. From a partnership perspective, the only way as any tech company or especially a startup can scale and operate in different geographies is through strong collaborative partnerships that is built on complementary offerings, as well as a lot of trust that we bring and a core mission that's aligned towards leveraging technology to solve some of the critical problems that we have out there. So see, some of the use cases that we very clearly looked at and how we have solved in the context of what we're doing in India, for example, working with the government to solve for the spurious seeds in the market. So ensuring that quality certified seeds come to the farmers so that they don't fail even before they start, right? So ensuring that, to your earlier point, when you mentioned theft or somebody takes a sampling and produces something and not really confident on what comes out as a quality, and the small use cases which enable major market opening. For example, we have producers here by leveraging technology, they're able to get access to a much larger premium market outside for export because it has full traceability. you have all the required certificates, and there is enough value for everybody in the ecosystem. So it kind of helps open larger markets for customers. Some of the largest carbon project developers use a platform. So for them, the water saving, leveraging the alternative wetting and drying methodology is about 60-70%. So it's significant, and that also contributes to significant reduction in emissions. So leveraging tech to really make that real life impact, and being able to take those use cases which are proven and then deploy into a geography where we know we have a strong partner we can trust. I think that's where a lot of excitement comes in. That's where we believe this is where a partnership can take to newer heights. I think we're very, very excited for that opportunity, and really thank your team and all the focused effort that collectively both our teams have been putting there. To your other question, you have an all-encompassing tech and everything that you have in your hand. I think we would really see if we could make the world a more equitable, transparent place to be, so that everybody has access to quality natural resources. So that I think today the world has enough resources. It's probably the over exploitation, or really the concentration of some of that in certain industries or certain countries that are creating that large disconnect. I think technology can play a very, very significant role, and if you have the opportunity to bring that equitably, I think the world can solve some critical problems, having access to clean water, to ensuring we eradicate poverty, to ensuring we have access to basic amenities for everybody. I think that'll be a better world for all of us to see. So I'm hoping that's something that we can see in our lifetime. Yeah.
I'm hoping for that new world as well. That's my dream. Thank you very much, Anil. A wonderful chat.